Nigeria's Supreme Court has dismissed the appeals of the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Atiku Abubakar, and the Labour Party's LP, Peter Obi, challenging President Bola Tinubu's victory in the February 25th presidential election. The court, in its verdict delivered today, upheld the judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, confirming Tinubu's legitimacy as the elected president of Nigeria. The 7-judge panel ruled that the opposition appeals over claims of fraud, electoral law violations, and Tinubu's ineligibility to run for president all lacked merit. The Supreme Court, presided over by Justice Inyang Okoro, also ruled that INEC's failure to electronically transmit the results of the 2023 presidential election to iRev did not affect the results of the election won by Bola Tinubu. Now, to further discuss this, joining me on the news, I have a political scientist, Azim Oladimeji Salako. Azim, welcome to News Central Now. Thank you for joining me.
For having me. Good afternoon, Nigeria.
So in terms of the questions, the accusations, even the litigations around President Tinubu's victory in February, all of it has been laid to rest now by the Supreme Court. In terms of any potential next moves, for opposition members in Nigeria, we know that it's just at the Supreme Court it ends. What do you think we should expect? Is this a time now for rebuilding?
Okay, thank you very much. I like the question, and I would like to start by congratulating the President of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu. Of course, there is always an end to every process, and the end to the presidential election has come today, and then it has went to the favor of President Bola Tinubu. But there are three fundamentals which I have highlighted as part of what should be the focus of our review, and then one of it responds directly to your question. The three fundamentals which I have highlighted here, number one is the issue, which is how do government from here intend to establish strong legitimacy? The second one is the lesson that we can draw from this Supreme Court judgment. And then the third is the expectation after this Supreme Court judgment. What should be the expectation of Nigeria? And if you would permit me, I can quickly, explain each of these features.
Okay, so, Azim, just hold on, because I actually have a question about the expectations and the lessons, but in particular, when we break down these judgments, we heard that from all the justices, there appears to be no dissenting opinion that the cases before them lacked merit. When it came to the issue of double nomination that the Obi camp put forth, with the Atiku camp, it was an issue around the drug charge that the president initially had, the drug involvement, let's not say charge, that the president had, and of course him paying a fine to the U.S. government. Then also issues around the Chicago State University situation. But in terms of what the Supreme Court put forth as what we consider precedents, what do you think is really the defining moment from this judgment?
Well, the defining moment for the judgment is that on the allegations on the borders on forgery, borders on drug and all of that. The Supreme Court is very clear, saying that it does not have jurisdiction. And it went further to say that the jurisdiction, explains that the matter ought to have been discussed at the level of the trial court. And then that the candidate of the PDP and Labour Party are now bringing to the fore these new issues shows that they are not prepared to question and probe the legitimacy of the current government or the occupier of the presidency, Bola Tinubu. I learned also that the Supreme Court argues that where were they or what were they doing when the Independent National Electoral Commission announced and declared the president, Ashwadi Bola Tinubu, as the president? And where were they also when he was sworn in as the president of Nigeria? Arguing that subsequently, appellants should ensure that they put their house in order before they go to the tribunal, that at the end of the tribunal, there are some certain cases that the Supreme Court will not give chances of hearing. And I think that is one of the lessons that politicians in the subsequent election must have learned from this verdict and, of course, this judgment.
So let's talk about some more lessons, because there's also a conversation to be had around what the court did say about iRev and the failure of INEC to upload on the iRev server. And of course, the conversation revolves around credibility. So in terms of the case and the reflection it has on the electoral system in Nigeria, part one of this question is, what do you think that reflection actually is, up to the point that the Supreme Court had to, in fact, call out INEC for that failure of uploading to iRev?
Now, that is exactly the major lesson that I have drawn from the Supreme Court judgment. And then the manual collation, what the Supreme Court judgment have just clarified is that the manual collation of result remains the only process of counting and verifying voting. And I would say this unequivocally, that this threw a heavy dent and a confidence crisis at the Independent National Electoral Commission, who had promised that all results will be published, transmitted in real time on iRev. But the Supreme Court has just clarified today that the only process that is known to the law is still remains the manual collation of results. And then beyond all of this, it becomes a heavy burden for INEC to bear in subsequent election in 2027, and in fact, in the coming election in some states, because what the Supreme Court judgment has done today is to clarify between law and policy, and to state unequivocally that law supersedes policy of INEC. But I think in a sane society, both should not be contradictory, but should be complementary. And then, therefore, I think that politicians or those in the business of party election must now focus, do all things that is required of them to monitor election from their polling unit up to the local government polling coalition center, up to the state coalition center.
Okay, Azim, I need you to hold on now. Azim, I need you to hold on, because I want to bring in my second guest on this conversation. And joining me now is a former Nigeria Bar Association chairman, Onueze Okocha, and he's going to also join this conversation because, of course, all the conversations today right now are being quite dominated by the decision of the Supreme Court. Mr. Okocha, welcome to News Central Now. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Thank you. So we've seen the decision of the Supreme Court as it has to do with the appeals from the Atiku and PDP camps, as well as the Labour Party and OB camps. In terms of the legal precedents or principles that the Supreme Court may have considered in making a ruling on this case, what do you think it is? Because we are expecting all of the individual judges to release their opinions as it may be, but that will take the next few days, just on the basis of what we heard today.
Well, I think, as you know, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter in presidential election petition matters. And what they have stated will be accepted as a law of the land now that they've delivered. The issues that they sought to resolve, that is, the parties who appeared before the Supreme Court sought to resolve, were all resolved in favor of the president, Ahmed Bola Tinubu. So we will wait to hear the details of those decisions made by each of the individual justices that sat on appeal, and then we can take it from there. But the final bottom line, as they say, is that the appeals were dismissed, and the victory of President Bola Tinubu was upheld.
So you're a senior advocate of Nigeria. You've appeared before this same court. You've worked with, I won't say work with them, but again, let's say you've appeared there. But when we look at the involvement of the Supreme Court, the involvement of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, not just at the national presidential level, but across the states as it may be, what do you think that says about the country's democratic process? Because in the lead up to this, there have been questions as to why so many elections in Nigeria end up at tribunals, end up in the courts, and we don't have a system where everyone can see the credibility and the validity in the process and say, fine, we lost, you won. Fine, I won, let's move forward.
I think that has to do with the attitude of litigants and the proverbial Nigerian spirit of not accepting defeat. We always say you must show magnanimity in victory, and you must show camaraderie and what they call cooperation when you have lost. We should accept that there is only going to be one man who will be president. To fight it to the logical conclusion you have done. And the logical conclusion is that Bola Ahmed Tinubu won. Nigerians should embrace that decision and allow the president to govern. You see, these litigations are distracting to the person who has been elected or declared elected. Local government chairman, councillor, governor, deputy governor, president, vice president. You distract them. 6 months have gone by. Then nearly 6 months, from the 29th of May, when the president was sworn in. You must agree that this may have distracted him from his focus. So let us accept that there must be a victor and there must be a vanquished. Vanquished in the sense of a loser in an election petition, not vanquished in the sense of being wiped out as if in a battle. We must cooperate with ourselves. Nigeria is our country, and we must move forward. There are election petitions in other countries, but you don't see them get to this crescendo. The famous one was Albert Gore and George Bush. And everybody accepted when the Supreme Court decided that matter in the United States of America. And so be it for our own here. Let us move on as one country, as one people.
And just before you joined us, Mr. Okocha, my other guest, Mr. Salako, was talking about the lessons, particularly in terms of elections and even political players in the system. And he mentioned, of course, them monitoring elections, the nomination process. What lessons do you think politicians should take away from the situation we've seen finally laid to rest before us today?
Well, it is true. We all know that elections have now become a matter of how much you deploy to the process, even in spite of the provisions of the Electoral Act, that nobody should contribute more than a certain amount of money to a political party. They even set limits on how much a political party can spend on a campaign. But nobody monitors those things because they are not really visible, openly visible to the general public. Politics is a game which requires money, because you have to send people around the country, and you know what the logistic problems are in this country. So until we're able to have proper arrangements in place, I know that in some places, people do not even need to go to the electoral polling station. Some people can even vote from far away. You'd follow. Some Americans can be in the Philippines and vote for a presidential election holding in America. Absentee ballots, you understand? So this is the thing that we need to upgrade our electoral process so that the deployment of money can be reduced to its barest minimum. And that is what causes all this riotous behavior. Because these young boys are anxious to cause damage, carry ballot boxes, destroy ballot papers. But when they know that an election is just a contest to select a leader, and that leader is coming to make sacrifices, we must agree that this is not the best we can do as a country.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining me. A former Nigeria Bar Association chairman, Onoeze Okocha, SAN, and also political scientist Azim Oladimeji Salako.